Welcome back to another episode of the RenoRun Drill Down, where we're talking to experienced professionals in various topics in various fields to help out our contractors and their companies. My name is Jay. I'm the customer service lead here at RenoRun, and today we're sitting with Lauren, our director of people. How's it going, Lauren?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good,
Not too
good.
bad. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do today is pick your brain a little bit, get to know you, talk about your role, ask you some questions. So first thing, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your role, how you got there.
Sure. So I am the Director of People Ops, which is human resources and talent acquisition.
Okay.
And I have been in that field for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with RenoRun since we were around 70 people, so crazy times, a long time ago.
How many people are we now?
Oh, in excess of 550. Growing every day.
That's a lot of growth. Awesome. So one question that I have is, I'm very familiar with HR, HR manager, what those kind of roles entail. Director of people or director of people ops seems like a bit of a newer role. Can you maybe explain the differences between the two?
Yeah. You know what? HR has a bit of a bad rep. It's kind of like a stale term, if you like.
Okay.
People think of HR, they have like a specific view of it. So in a lot of companies now, it's simply referred to people because it just generally is people. The real difference for my role is it's human resources and the talent acquisition piece, both together.
Okay. And is that typical across all companies? Is that normal? Is that just something that RenoRun does?
Here and there, it will depend. Sometimes they will have those functions separate, but for us, we hire for culture, and that's really intrinsically linked with the human resources piece as well.
Okay, interesting. So one question that I do have is, why is HR beneficial for a company, or why is it necessary?
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think it is beneficial. I think it's critical.
Critical.
RenoRun doesn't exist without its RenoRunners. And they come first, and it's HR's role to ensure that that comes to life, as well as being a port of call for anyone at any time for anything they need.
Yeah, and I can attest to that because I bug you guys all the time about all kinds of stuff, and you guys are always there to help us out. So,
true.
yeah, I would agree. Actually, I think we can emphasize critical to RenoRun success and every company's success. So that being said, can you talk a little bit about what that might look like at a smaller company with less than 570 employees, and maybe the difference between what it looked like at 70 employees versus now?
Yeah, I mean, we were a smaller company not that long ago. Essentially, the function of HR is to have an objective and safe place for employees to go to. So whether it's a huge company or whether it's a much smaller company, it's about providing that support to employees, being the ear and being able to sort of problem solve for folks. And I would say it's the same, irrespective of what scale you're at.
Okay, so the fundamentals stay the same. How does it change when you start to get bigger and bigger and start adding more people into the mix?
Yeah, the benefits of being smaller is that you have the opportunity to have a real in-person human touch with HR. And obviously, as your employee base grows, you lose that individual connection with people. So it becomes necessary to use technology and processes to be able to either automate, allow people to self-serve, or to be able to still connect with them, but via technology. There's a lot of people to look after, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is there a way that you can leverage the technology but also keep that human touch or human connection?
Yeah, so particularly with the culture at RenoRun and it being so important, that is something that's always at the forefront, is the employee experience. And that is as simple as when we're using technology, not using scripts, using the verbiage and the language that is really true to our culture. And making sure that there is always the open door. So when people do need a person, they're able to access a person.
Yeah, gotcha. And when it comes to HR, what kind of challenges do you think a leader of a business or a CEO of a company would face?
I think what happens, I'll speak to like previous experiences, what tends to happen is HR is seen as a service function. A function to be able to keep people happy and to resolve disputes, problem solve. But actually it's a core pillar of a business, just like sales or finance, for example. All of those departments are made up of people, and it's really critical that HR is able to be a partner to the business and to those departments to be able to craft that employee experience and that employee life cycle.
Okay, gotcha. And you also are responsible for talent acquisition. So how does that also tie into the mix?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's intrinsically linked. So particularly with a company that is really focused on culture. So for example, our interview process, it has to assess the technical skills, but it also has to assess the cultural competencies for RenoRun. So different businesses will have different needs of those for its culture. And being able to really identify those cultural competencies is essential to keep that culture. And that will vary with your business's scale, its vision, its vibe, but ultimately it's a reflection of the customer base. So HR influences TA, talent acquisition, that influences HR and all of those practices. Very, very connected.
And it all starts in the hiring process.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I would say a step back from there. It starts with understanding your company's culture and what you want it to be. And like I say, being able to identify those soft skills, those critical skills that every employee needs to have to be successful in the organization, irrespective of their role. So if we take RenoRun, for example, when we were very new, you had to be able to pivot and adapt and pick up new skills and pick up potentially areas of roles that weren't yours. And that ability to be adaptable was absolutely critical in everyone that we hired. So that was a key competency at that stage for us, and still is, really.
Adaptability. Okay, interesting. And when it comes to talent acquisition or hiring, what are some of the challenges that maybe some of our contractors or smaller companies might face in that process?
Yeah, I mean, hiring is not easy. It's very time consuming, and it will really depend on the role that you're looking for and how many people are available in that market. Let's say there aren't that many people available with the specific skills that you're looking for. Then your focus and the workload becomes trying to market your role and get it out there so you can get as many people as possible. Often in those situations, because there's usually a need to fill with that person, you can sometimes negotiate your bar of what you're looking for, i.e. because you need that person.
Yeah.
That's often a mistake that's made, and really you need to, at the very start of the hiring process, clearly identify the skills that you're looking for and don't negotiate on them. The other really important part when it comes to hiring is keeping a consistent process for every single person you assess. Otherwise, you're not making a scientific decision.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where like some biases come into play.
Exactly.
Things like that, right?
Yeah.
Experience, or you go with what you're used to instead of branching out and trying new things and new thoughts and experiences.
All of those biases, and having a consistent process really helps you mitigate those.
Okay, interesting. I want to bring it back to some of our contractors and maybe some of our smaller companies that we might be dealing with. If a company's at its infancy or very, very small, what are some of the first things that they should be concerned about when it comes to HR? Like, where do they start?
Compliance, really. I would say that's the first step, is making sure that you are doing things legally and properly. And so being able to have a good relationship with the local board or whatever the government representation is in that particular area, so that you know where those resources are and you know where to refer. And then from there, once you understand what you should be doing, then you can really start thinking about how you want to be doing it. So you don't necessarily have to follow a script. You are your own culture, your own vision for the organization. So you set the tone of that organization. So compliance, and then your own sort of spin and your own vision of what environment you want to create.
Okay, and is that applicable to a company of any size?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, those things never go away. The compliance that never goes away, and the culture never goes away, if you can help it.
So those are both necessities.
Yes.
Regardless of if you're 5 people or 500 people, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And then obviously that's going to change, and you're going to have to adapt. Like you said, as you scale and grow, you're going to have to start layering in other things.
Yeah.
I want to get back into hiring, because I think a lot of the people watching are probably going to be interested in that. And I think when people think of HR, that's like where their mind goes. It's like, you hire people, you fire people, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in between. But I want to focus a little bit on the hiring right now. So when going through the hiring process, what are some of the critical steps that are required, and some of the things that you guys are looking for from candidates? That's a two-parter.
Yeah. So the critical steps are often the missed ones, which is really outlining the specific skills that you need and being super clear on that. Too often people will go out and look for people, speak to them, and then use that to sort of formulate what it is they're looking for. But ultimately a business will have a very specific need. And so identify that need, identify how you're going to test for those skills during the interview process. So design the interview process, and then go out and look for people with the relevant skills.
Yeah, and you're also kind of setting the expectations for them as well, so they know what they're walking into. Instead of having a conversation and then the job is something completely different.
Exactly. And if you're new to hiring, it's not something that you've done before, having a moment to think about what questions you would ask as a candidate so that you can be prepared to answer those questions as someone making the hire. So for example, what's the next step for this role? Where is this role going? So as someone that is hiring, you need to have some kind of idea in your mind of where that role can progress into if you want to keep that person in your organization, which is always the goal.
Okay, so you've established what you want. You find some good candidates, you start going through the interview process. Obviously a big part of that process is looking at their experience, right? And seeing if they're going to be a good fit right off the bat. But what are some other things that employers should be looking at when it comes to their candidates?
Yeah, so I would say that if your culture is important, before the technical skills and that technical experience, and when I say technical experience, I mean just the on-the-job experience. Before that comes your cultural competencies. So what kind of skills and attributes does someone need to be able to really succeed in your working environment? Every working environment is different. So like we said before, really isolate those. What is a competency that everyone in the organization needs, irrespective of their role, and assess that in addition to those more kind of specific technical skills. Okay.
And when you talk about cultural competencies, for those who maybe don't know what that means, can you maybe list off a few or explain where to find them or how to figure out what you want those cultural competencies to be?
Yeah, so RenoRun has a number of competencies, and we have our culture values that we use. But really, they're the skills that we identified that people needed to be successful at RenoRun. So like I said, every company will have its version of this. But to give some examples of RenoRun, we need people to be customer focused. Lots of organizations do, but our customer base is a very specific, it has a very specific culture all on its own. So it's really important that we represent that internally as well. So customer focused attitude is something that we want every employee to have. Another one that we talked about before was adaptability. So when you're a startup and things are moving quickly, people need to be able to pivot and pick up things wherever the business needs them. So adaptability is key. And we grow incredibly quickly. And ideally, if you're a starting company, you're going to be growing quickly. So people need to desire that growth. They want to, people that want to be able to grow and develop in their careers are super important. So that would be another example of a cultural competency.
Okay. And so if they're looking out for these types of I guess, positive competencies that they want to have on their team, if we flip that around and talk about some of the negative ones, or maybe things, some warning signs or things to look out for during the hiring process, what would those be?
Oof, that's a tricky one.
I'm sure there's a million of them,
Yeah.
but some of the, like, you know.
Yeah. There are some key red flags, but I think almost everybody would be able to identify those in a hiring practice. They're pretty obvious.
Okay.
So I really would recommend focusing on the things that you do need and figuring out ways to test for those things, and not getting distracted by other nice to haves that might not be essential to the role, because that's the other thing that sometimes happens. You'll have a candidate that doesn't have exactly the experience you need, but they have something else quite similar. Is that really going to cut it?
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe, sometimes you just got to keep looking and don't negotiate, like we said before, on actually what it is that you need.
And I feel like sometimes too, like I've got caught up in this during hiring processes where you get distracted by how well a person communicates or how they're able to make a connection with you.
Yep.
And you think, oh, this person's going to be great.
Yep.
And then you kind of don't pay attention to the actual skills and competencies that they might have that you want. And you get sidetracked and like comes back and bites you in the ass afterwards.
Absolutely. And what you've landed on there is your biases coming into play.
Yeah.
Identifying with people and being able to, like you said, connect with them and have that vibe. That doesn't mean that they necessarily have all the skills that you need.
Yeah. Been there, done that. Learned my lesson. So you've gone through the hiring process. You found some good candidates that you like. You make sure that their competencies match what you're looking for, and they move on to the next rounds. What are some important next steps once you've found the right person?
Making sure that the right people are involved in your hiring process. So often what happens is a specific team or a specific, a specific team that knows what that job is. They are the ones that interview. But often, particularly in a smaller organization, there's lots of collaboration between departments.
Yeah.
So they will be partnering with other people from other teams that are in completely different roles. But nevertheless, they need to partner with them. So having a cross-functional interviewer is also really important. So this person can speak this language in this role, but can they convey that to someone who doesn't understand that role? That's really important in a business that is growing and is matrix and needs to communicate. Even at a smaller scale, that's really, really important, that communication and collaboration piece.
Yeah, and I know, like, based off of my experience, I've had some situations where we thought we found a great candidate and we put them through to the next round and somebody else from another department interviews them and their feedback is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, kind of taken aback from
Yeah.
it. So I guess that last step is pretty critical as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that you're not like blinded by
Yeah.
smoke and mirrors or getting sidetracked or being
Exactly.
influenced by your biases.
Exactly, yeah. It brings in a level of objectivity to the interview process, and the actual final step of our interview process is a culture interview. So that does not look at the technical skills at all. It really focuses on those cultural competencies and asks, ultimately, is this person the right person for RenoRun? So that really takes out any potential subjectivity or biases from the process.
Now, if we're talking about a smaller company, maybe like 5 employees,
Yep.
10 employees, there might only be one person responsible for the
Yeah.
hiring process and all that stuff. How can they go through a similar process without the same resources as a larger company?
Yeah. I would say that there is always one person leading the hiring. There's always one person that is making that hire and is ultimately responsible for the decision. But even if you're a very small team, having multiple people involved in the process, in individual interviews, is really, really valuable, because they will conduct the same interview each time. And because they're individual interviews, you can reconvene and you automatically make it a panel decision. So even if it's 2-3 people that are consistently doing these interviews, they will eventually form a really solid idea of what good means for them.
Okay, awesome. Now, with hiring, with growth, there's going to be some inevitable terminations,
Yeah.
right? Can you speak to us a little bit about that process and what that looks like, and how how to go about doing it? Because it's a
Yeah.
touchy subject, right? Nobody really wants to talk about it.
Yeah,
but
it's really difficult. And with hiring and solving employees' problems being like the real positive attribute of my role and the team's role, this is the ugly bit of the role that no one really enjoys. So first and foremost, I would say that any exit is it's really important that you kind of embrace that person's time at the organization. So if someone is leaving of their own choice, then you want to make sure that you recognize their contributions. When it's performance related and you're having to terminate someone, the way that you can think about that is from the perspective of protecting the people in the organization that are performing, because a negative performer in an organization inevitably brings everybody else down. So although terminations are not fun, nobody enjoys it, it is a really healthy and necessary part of a business to be able to keep the performance bar where it needs to be.
Yeah, agreed. And so I guess the focus should be on the bigger picture and not specifically that individual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's what impact are they having on the rest of the team, on the business?
Yeah.
Address that rather than
Yes.
the specific person or their actions or anything like that.
There is always a nice way to go about it. What I will say is, particularly for smaller businesses, is that the compliance piece is still super important.
Yeah.
So making sure that you understand how to terminate someone fairly, the steps that you need to take, so that you're protecting the business, but also making it as less of a painful experience for everybody involved as well.
Absolutely. Now, leading up to termination or a successful career within a company, obviously we're going to encounter different types of behaviors, different types of work ethics, and all kinds of different stuff, right? People are people.
Yep.
Everybody's going to be different. Can you give some advice on how to manage different types of behaviors and work ethics?
Yeah, this isn't easy.
It's a pretty broad question too, so.
Yeah. What I would say is there are two parts to it, and it's a balance. First of all, there is a level of objectivity that you need. You need to go in with a consistent, in a consistent way for every individual. However, to your point, individuals are individuals. They have different personalities, they have different communication styles, different values. So it's about understanding that people are individuals as well. So it is a real fine balance between fairness, that objectivity piece, and then empathy, really understanding the differences of people. And the reason that you want to continually be aware of the differences of people is because you don't want a homogenous organization. You don't want a cookie cutter every time you hire. Why don't you want that? Because the business won't be able to adapt when it needs to, because everybody will be the same.
It will suffer eventually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And when you have people who have different ways of communicating, different styles, how are some ways that you can keep those differences, but also allow them to integrate well with their peers?
Yeah, so this is tied a little bit to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because although that looks at like the broader demographics of an organization, it also looks at different personalities and different styles of working and communicating, like we said. So the first step there is always to bring awareness to these differences, to help people understand each other better. So even just as simple as talking about different communication styles and what that looks like in practice can help people understand each other much better in practice on the day-to-day. And that is really important for that communication and collaboration. For people to be able to communicate effectively, they have to appreciate their differences. So that's also part of the role of HR and of people, is to bring awareness to the inherent differences of human beings.
I am kind of curious about we're kind of going off into like a different topic here, but I'm curious about the HR team itself. And you have HR, talent acquisition, and I'm curious how they all tie into each other. Is there a deep connection between the two? Are they siloed a little bit? What does that look like? I don't know much about,
Yeah.
like I know the roles and that kind of stuff, but I don't know the inner workings and what goes on inside of an HR team.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I joined, we were sort of just over 50 employees in total. So I joined the HR team. We had one person in HR and one person in talent acquisition. And to a 5 or 10 person company, 50 might seem like a lot. But you will very quickly get to the size where you need to have that additional support for the people. So like I say, when I joined, it was a very small team, and now we've had to evolve it into a team that is responsible for, like we said before, that automation piece, so that technology and using technology to help us deliver our processes, and then a very much a hands-on in-person piece. So we have an HR ops team and we have what we call an HR business partner team. And that business partner is really an in-person contact for employees and for managers. And the ops team, like I say, is there for helping keeping all of our processes running. The TA team, although we are intrinsically linked in terms of all of our processes and we meet together all the time, they do work quite separately because their day-to-day job is that much different.
Okay.
So they work in multiple locations so that they can get that real close market expertise, and they work very, very closely with managers to really understand the needs of hiring for those roles.
Okay, awesome. Earlier in our conversation, you briefly mentioned DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which might be a new term for a lot of people watching, but has become more and more important over the last few years. And we see these different types of roles in various companies. What I wanted to know is what is your experience or how do you lead conversations around DEI within the company? Or how can the people watching do that?
Luckily, we do have some experience of this because DEI is so important to the culture at RenoRun. But it's not an easy topic. People are inherently uncomfortable talking about all of the facets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that can cause them to avoid getting into those conversations.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want. It's so important that those conversations are being had and that topic is being brought to the fore. So as with most things, it starts with awareness. So it's about helping and coaching people on understanding how to talk about it and getting them comfortable with talking about it. So once you can start having those conversations, you can really start investigating and tackling things. So how to talk about things is the first step.
Awesome. Completely agree. Good. All right. Before I let you go, is there any message that you want to share with the people that might be watching?
Yeah, I would say, irrespective of the size of the business, really taking time to design the kind of environment that you want your organization to be is really, really important. And then building from there. It will really set the tone and the expectations and the performance of individuals, and it's really critical to the longevity of a business, the culture.
Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of the RenoRun Drill Down. We'll see you next time.